The Imperial Watch and City Guard are some of the best parts of Oblivion's NPC lineup. They offer some amazing and memorable pieces of dialogue and can either be a help or hindrance to the player in dire times. Most of the Watchmen are fairly cut and paste, however, with only a few of them offering unique appearances and dialogue. Of those who stand out are namely the Watch Captains. The captains control and command the city's security detail and answer only to the count of their respective city. There are many quests and controversies that surround a handful of them, shrouding their names and titles in corruption. However, have we ever stopped to think which captain had the most successful career throughout the Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion? Let's discuss who is the most accomplished guard based on in-game actions and duty, as well as which guard has had the best service record in general. There are obvious captains which would definitely fall short on this list. Ulrich Leland of Shaden Hall, for example, was caught handing out unnecessary and at times even fake fines to the citizens of the city. For that, he was sent either to the jail or killed, depending on the choices we make. Another guard captain who follows Leland's path of shaking down the citizens is Auden's Avidius. Auden's is the subject of the side quest, Imperial Corruption, and it ends with him being arrested and jailed for his crimes against the people. After 10 days, Auden's escapes from jail and attempts to murder us, shrouding his legacy even further. So who are the good guys then? Who are the ones who don't abuse their power and actually protect and serve the citizens of their city? Starting off with a decent one, we have Captain Burd of Bruma. Burd is a Nord, and because of that, respects the customs and traditions of the majority who inhabit the northernmost city. A lot of rumors surround Burd and how he's able to blend the cultures present within Cyrodiil and that of Skyrim's. As far as we know, Burd hasn't faced much controversy during his time as guard captain. There are 4 different quests that Captain Burd plays a part in, all of which are part of the main quest line. The main 2 that his efforts should be focused on are Defense of Bruma and Bruma Gate. Together, we close the Oblivion Gate just outside of Bruma as he ventures with us into the terrifying hellscape of the Deadlands. He stays by our side the whole time, and even when his courage falters, he's able to pull himself together. During Defense of Bruma, Burd becomes non-essential, so his time in our game could quickly come to an end. Burd, along with the other brave soldiers from each city, fights waves of Daedra and holds off the attackers until we're able to complete our mission in the Great Gate. Overall, Burd seemingly deserves a position at the top of this list. Following Burd's potential demise during Defense of Bruma, Lieutenant Garrick Cenarl will take the title of Bruma's guard captain. Honestly, there's barely any information on Garrick in general, and the only thing we have on him are his true feelings towards the Nords of the city. He refers to them as ignorant barbarians, and it seems like one day, the truth will slip out and likely cause him some trouble down the line. Garrick's accomplishments reach nowhere near that of Captain Bird's. Garrus Aurelian was the second in command for the Shaden Hall Guard, right behind Ulrich Leland. It isn't explicitly stated, but can be believed that he took the title of guard captain after Leland was dealt with. He was an advocate for seeking justice the proper way and letting the law deal with Leland's misbehavior during the Corruption and Conscience quest. This gets him some points, but beyond that, there really isn't much more story or personal achievements that we hear of regarding him. So, unfortunately, he doesn't really top the accomplishments of Captain Burd. Technically, Amidus Grigori of Shaden Hall isn't a watch captain, but he does have some sort of commanding role during the Wayward Knight quest, as he's the leader of those who were tasked with keeping an eye on the Oblivion Gate. Since there's a lack of authoritative figures with high ranks in Shaden Hall after Corruption and Conscience, I decided to add him in here, but it seems as though, unfortunately, beyond his petty squabble with the knights themselves and his standard knowledge of Oblivion Gates, we don't hear much about him or his achievements either, so he also doesn't surpass that of Captain Burd on this list. Celia Draconis is a young captain of the Leyawiin Guard, and unfortunately, her duty on the line is ended early when we're sent to assassinate her, as per the Dark Brotherhood quest, Next of Kin. We learn that she did a tour in the Imperial Legion, likely traveling abroad to another province for her rounds. She's since settled into a rule-following, honorable, and friendly guard captain who unfortunately made enemies with the wrong person. Who knows where her career would have taken her if not for her untimely death, but it's ultimately because of that we can't place her very high as the guard captain with the most accomplishments. The other guard captain present within Leyawiin during the game is Decentius Opsius. However, Decentius, similar to Amidus of Shaden Hall, doesn't really offer much beyond an interesting story on an elf named Torval the Pilot. He plays an even lesser role in the game though, as he isn't tied to any quest or event and offers nothing more beyond his legends of the Merethic era. So he certainly doesn't get a very high spot on the guard captains list either. Vera Lyris of the Bravil Guard happens to be the only captain for this city's watch. She doesn't offer much in the way of dialogue other than her opinions on the Count, which are that he used to be a great man, but power has since spoiled him. Vera is a representative for Bravil when they send reinforcements over to Bruma for allies for Bruma. It's there she can be killed while fighting off the Daedra, giving her a heroic death like Captain Burd may receive. Beyond that, she doesn't offer much more in terms of accomplishments and providing aid during quests, so she doesn't reach Captain Bird's standards. As a side note, if she survives defense of Bruma, a bug occurs where she spends the rest of her days wandering back and forth between Bruma and Bravil, as she was coded to sleep in her tent up north, but patrol the streets down south. Her only release from this wandering curse is if she's killed on the road. Moving along to the West Weald, we have Dion from Skingrad. The citizens of Skingrad recount Dion as being strict and focused while he's on duty. Outside of his one relevant side quest, he doesn't really offer much in the way of intriguing dialogue beyond suggesting wines, cheese, and sweet rolls. When it comes to the quest, Paranoia, Dion approaches us and asks us if we're working with Glarther. We can respond in a few different ways, but they all end up with him telling us to be careful around him. At the end of the quest, there's a very good chance that Dion himself can end up killing Glarther instead of detaining him. Obviously, Glarther proves to be a threat to himself and others, so necessary action is required, but the town guard doesn't even try to take him in, so Dion unfortunately loses points for that. The other guard captain of Skingrad is Danus Artellian, although he'll make it a point to tell us that he's strictly the captain of the castle guard and not the town guard, as that's Dion's job. He even explicitly states that he has little care for what goes on in the town, showcasing ignorance and arrogance in his line of work. His comments aren't lost on the townsfolk either, as many of them say that he's stuck up and has a massive ego, a few even indicating that someone should quote-unquote teach him a lesson. Unfortunately for Danus, we don't hear much good about him, so he reaches nowhere near the top of the most accomplished guard captains. Heading further west, we have the champion who might just give Captain Burd a run for his positioning, Savlian Matius of Kvatch. Now technically, as of the time of Kvatch's besiegement, Matius wasn't actually the city's captain, he was just the highest ranking officer left alive. However, that is certainly grounds enough for me to include him on this list, as he's the last authority left standing. As we all know, Kvatch was the first city to get sacked and leveled by Mehrunes Dagon's Daedric forces. Many citizens, guards, and nobles died during the attack, and I don't think anybody would have been blamed if they focused their efforts solely on saving themselves. On the other hand, Savlian Matius stood his ground and risked his life by helping many townsfolk escape the city. After that, Matius set up a barricade outside the city in an attempt to hold the road and keep the attackers contained. After the Oblivion Gate is closed, he charges into the city and braves even more Daedra, purely in an attempt to rescue the survivors in the chapel of Akatosh. Once the way back is clear and the civilians have been evacuated, Savlian insists on pushing further and reaching the castle in order to save the Count next. Together with the remaining Kvatch forces, a small patrol of Imperial legionnaires and the hero of Kvatch, we retake back the city and eliminate the Daedric threat. Unfortunately, we failed to reach the Count in time as he was found dead in his room. Beyond this, Savlian insists on staying in the city, more specifically the castle, to rebuild Kvatch from the ashes like once before. During Allies for Bruma, he'll even send over a Kvatch soldier while the city still burns and is in ruins, as he's able to realize the threat that the Daedra and their Oblivion Gates pose. Overall, I think Savlian Matius, the lone guard who was able to stand up against the Daedra and reorganize the town's security, deserves a spot at the top of this list. Going to the Abyssian Sea next, we have Captain Langley for the Anvil Guard. Captain Langley offers us no unique lines of dialogue, and the citizens of Anvil have nothing at all to say about him either. The only interesting information he gives us is when asked about the city. He considers the job easy and says that there's really not much work to be done. Quite comically, the unofficial Elder Scrolls pages points out that this is likely why Countess Melona Umbernox wants to have him replaced during the Thieves Guild quest, taking care of Lex. There's honestly not much more to him, as we know nothing about his past endeavors, so he can be dismissed for the title of the most accomplished guard captain, especially considering he eventually gets demoted. An interesting side note about Langley is that the castle steward, Darahil, actually pays him a nightly visit on Lourdes and Sundus at midnight. likely as an inappropriate workplace relationship. But even better is the fact that Darahill's coding doesn't allow her to sleep in the single bed with Langley, so she just watches him sleep all night. Moving north to the Great Forest, we have Captain Bittneld the Cursebringer of Chorrol. Bittneld is minorly involved in the quest, Canvass the Castle. However, the only information or aid he even gives us is simply saying that he's unaware of who took the painting, but he is able to point us in the right direction of finding out said information. He's also the center focus of a little non-journal love story involved with Emfred of the Grey Mare. Beyond that, we unfortunately don't hear much of his achievements or accomplishments whilst being city captain. We do know that he cares deeply for the city's security, as he shows through his dialogue in Canvass the Castle and even when asked about Chorrol, but it's not enough to push him past Captain Burd and Savlian Matius. Then we move on to the Imperial City, where there's quite a few of them, and begin with Langley's eventual replacement, Hieronymus Lex. Lex is arguably the most involved guard captain within the game, say other than Savlian Matius, as he is in some ways one of the main antagonists during the Thieves Guild questline. He has seemingly dedicated his career to eradicating the Thieves Guild and arresting the Grey Fox. Although his motives negatively affect the player, he isn't technically in the wrong for most of his actions, as the Thieves Guild does carry out illegal activities. He does have some questionable tactics, however, as he's targeted the beggars of the Imperial City waterfront in order to achieve his goals. After taking care of Lex has been completed, Lex is transferred over to Anvil and is made captain. His fellow guards are honored to have him there and even say that they've never met a finer man. All the meanwhile, the citizens of the Imperial City are happy about it because most of them never believed in the Grey Fox or the Thieves Guild's existence. Overall, Hieronymus Lex isn't the worst guard captain by any means and probably leans more towards the accomplished side, but still doesn't reach the top of this list. Up next, we have the oldest and perhaps most experienced guard that's featured, Adamus Phillida. In my opinion, Adamus is actually up at the top with Captain Burd and Savlian Matius. According to sources, Phillida has been in the Legion for over 40 years and is the highest ranking member of the Imperial Legion within Cyrodiil. More importantly though, to his accomplished claims, it's common knowledge that he has personally thwarted and stopped many of the Dark Brotherhood's contracts from being carried out. He survived numerous assassination attempts from the Brotherhood and has killed many members of their ranks. He's lasted long enough to reach retirement within the Legion itself, which not too many soldiers get the privilege of saying. Unfortunately for him, the Dark Brotherhood was simply too persistent, and it was from our own hand that Adamus was slain. It's very brave and uncommon for anybody to go up against the Dark Brotherhood, let alone just one man. It's those efforts mixed in with his general experience, rank, and public opinion that puts him high on our list. Then we have Captain Jeopard Montrose. Montrose plays a very minor part within the game and can very easily be missed in general. During the Dark Brotherhood quest, scheduled for execution, Montrose can be seen seated in the side room where the Emperor was slain. His job is seemingly to gain knowledge on the assassins who attacked Uriel Septim, but, as per his notes, hasn't learned very much at all. His men in the Imperial Sanctum don't think very highly of him, as they claim that this current posting run by Montrose is all a stunt to get promoted. Beyond that, we don't get much more information. Then we have Carmallo Truand. Carmallo is actually Auden's Avidius' replacement after completing Imperial Corruption. Honestly, the only information we get on Carmallo comes from the quest Taking Care of Lex, as he's considered the runner-up behind Idius Hayne on taking over as Anvil's guard captain. The recommendation list describes Carmallo as smart but inexperienced. This shows that he's likely going to have a decent career in the Legion, but for as of right now, doesn't have too many accomplishments under his belt. Next, we have Captain Giovanni Civello. Apart from sounding like he's fresh from Sicily, Civello unfortunately doesn't have too much information on him listed. He acts as Adamus Phillida's replacement during and after the quest Permanent Retirement. In a Black Horse Courier article, he says that Phillida took him under his wing, taught him everything he knows, and is going to continue the fight against the Dark Brotherhood. Similar to Truand from before, Civello will likely have a promising career as a guard captain, but for now is too inexperienced. Then we have Idius Hayne. Idius is actually the only guard captain who is willing to arrest Auden's Avidius during Imperial Corruption, as Hieronymus Lex specifically states that he's too busy tracking down the Grey Fox, and the other guard captain, whom we haven't discussed yet, Servatius Quintilius, is too afraid to risk his new position. Hayne, unfortunately, does need some persuasion to even hear us out on Avidius' corruption. resulting in either bribery, charming, or the persuasion game, as otherwise he outright dismisses our claims. Eventually though, Hayne will ask for 2 witnesses to come forward in order to move against Audens, and after that happens, he makes the arrest against his fellow guard captain. It's certainly a brave move to make, as it's just as easy to turn a blind eye on the wrongdoings of our peers. Furthermore, Hayne is actually listed as the best possible representative to become Anvil's new guard captain, as it describes him as loyal but not too bright. Hayne certainly has made a name for himself throughout the Legion, and if not for the others already covered, could have been a candidate for the title of most accomplished guard captain. Then lastly, we have the aforementioned Servatius Quintilius. Servatius fills the guard captain role after Hieronymus Lex gets transferred over to Anvil. As mentioned before, Servatius chooses the path of ignorance and decides to overlook the Thieves Guild's existence along with the Grey Fox. Along with this, he chooses to not take any action on Audens Avidius, as he's a new watch captain and is afraid of the repercussions that might follow such an arrest. Although he can't be blamed too harshly for that, as Idius likely has more authority than he does for such a matter. Beyond that, there's not much else on Servatius Quintilius to go off of, and unlike prior newbie watch captains, I feel like he's unlikely to have a successful career ahead of him. So now that every single watch captain and those who are some sort of authoritative high-ranking figure have been covered, it's time to answer our question: who is the most accomplished? It's unfortunate that we don't have much in the way of formal service records for most of the people on this list, as we can only see and hear through our own experience and that of the townsfolk for how good of a job each one is doing or has done. If I could narrow it down to the top 3, it would be Captain Burd of Bruma, Savlian Matius of Kvatch, and Adamus Phillida of the Imperial City. On the basis for the most accomplished guard captain in terms of lore and the game's history, I think Adamus Phillida deserves the crown simply due to his experience, ranking, and accomplishments with regards to investigating the Dark Brotherhood. On an in-game honor and bravery basis, it certainly is a toss-up between Savlian and Burd. Savlian stayed and risked his life for an already destroyed city, so that way every single surviving citizen could escape and none of the attacking Daedra could leave its limits. When all hope was gone, he charged headfirst into Castle Kvatch in search of the Count. His bravery knows no bounds. Burd, on the other hand, risked his life by entering inside of the Oblivion Gate with us in order to learn how to close any future portals. He then laid down his life during the defense of Bruma Quest and fought alongside Martin to help us secure the Great Sigil Stone. Savlian to me shows more bravery in the face of defeat, but Burd was the one to enter inside of the Daedric realm with us, and out of the two of them was the one to actually show up to Bruma's defense. My vote for most accomplished guard on an in-game honor and bravery basis probably goes to Savlian Matius of Kvatch, but it certainly was a close one. I'd love to know your thoughts on who you think the most accomplished guard captain of Oblivion is down below, and until next time, keep on adventuring.